shit.
They piece it together, they ask why. Every hidden corner, every alibi. They risk it all, they take the fall. For the truth that will stand tall.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. So I'll put some, Shane will put some comments up if you want to put where you're watching from today. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about this supposed alien-human hybrid program that has supposedly been going on in this country, and that there are facilities all over the US that have been doing this. Now, I've been into the UFO ET topic for many years, so I've heard this a lot from abductees, from thousands of cases all around the world of interactions with aliens. I don't like the word aliens because that implies beings from other planets. I think of these as species that are intelligent, but I don't think they come from outer space. I think they exist in other dimensions or in different forms amongst us. And we're just starting to hear official reports of the existence of these beings and programs that are creating hybrids between other species and humans. So when I started to think about this, I'll play the clip that has been going around, and a sitting Congressman, Tim Burchett, softly confirmed that this is true. So I'll play that now.
Okay, I want to play you a soundbite. Former colleague of yours, Matt Gaetz, making some pretty shocking statements yesterday about aliens. Take a look.
I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. Aliens that were living were in forced breeding programs with humans that had been abducted from war zones and from even the caravans of migrants.
All right. I mean, you know, I don't have the tinfoil hat on just yet, Congressman, but I'm wondering, you know, kind of how you react to that, because you are connected. You're on the UFO subcommittee. I mean, I'm just wondering what you make of that. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, I'm still a member of Congress, so I can't really comment too much on what Matt said. But I will say this.
Wait, seriously? Are you being serious, or is that tongue in cheek?
I'm being 100% serious. Okay. I've been 100% serious. I've been briefed by just about every alphabet agency there is. And I'll just tell you this, if they would release the things that I've seen, you would stay up, you'd be up at night worrying about or thinking about this stuff. We just need to disclose it all. I'm sick of it. I'll just tell you this, I was briefed last week on an issue, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago, and it would have set the earth on it. This country would have come unglued, I think, if they would have heard all that I heard. They would demand answers, and we need to. But you know, it's never going to get. Unfortunately, it just keeps getting covered up, and the people that know are dying or disappearing, as the case may be.
Wow.
And for the record, I'm not suicidal, and I don't take risks.
So he's also implying that these missing or unalived scientists are those that know about this program, and they might be getting silenced because of knowledge of these programs. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that this has been going on, and this might have always been the case. I don't think this is new. But I do think things change over generations. You know, our society changes, civilizations change. So the question that I want to try to answer today, and I did explore two different avenues or two different industries that might be getting influence from this hybridization program or programs. And it did lead me to, different rabbit holes with different conclusions. But the two areas that I thought of that a alien human hybridization program that would benefit greatly, one, I thought professional sports. If you think about, and I'm going to use Michael Jordan as an example, I think he's the best one where there might be a question of whether he was, genetically manipulated to become as dominant as he was. And I think everyone should know who Michael Jordan is. He won 6 championships with the Chicago Bulls. He's the most successful as far as marketing and endorsements go, the most successful NBA player. And he really set the stage for the marketing of athletes because he took it to another level. And he does represent one of the most successful brands in the Air Jordan franchise. So we don't have to question whether he is genetically gifted. There's no question about that. He's also extremely hardworking. That's been no secret. You can't just have this natural talent and expect to, win back-to-back championships. But it started to get me to look at other aspects as to how elite athletes become who they are. And it's not just athletic ability. There are a lot of moving parts. So I'll go a little into his endorsements. And, these are not secrets. When he was, let me see when this happened. In 1984, he signed, at the time, it was a groundbreaking endorsement deal with Nike for $2.5 million. What made this one groundbreaking is that he got royalties off the sales of the Air Jordan line. So he made 5% off of the revenue. And that was unusual at the time. And Nike became, I think they're number one as far as athletic shoe sales till this day. So 2024 generated $7 billion. And he got about $280 to $350 million just in that 1 year. And it is hugely successful. At this point, hundreds of billion dollars in revenue for Nike. And that's just one of his endorsements. He did other ones. So this is one of many of his marketing photos. And Shane, do you want to play the other ones that the Nike? Okay, yeah, he did also agreements with McDonald's. Okay, this is his Air Jordan line. So he's basically a marketing genius. And this involved a lot of moving parts from his agent to the companies, deals that went on that allowed him to get to this point. And he made a lot of money. And he made a lot of other people a lot of money. And we're not going to go too much into that, but I just wanted to really show just how far he branched marketing-wise. He did music, the song Jam. He did movies, all sorts of stuff. He's still a political figure, but certainly one of the most successful as far as marketing goes, athletes of our time. What some people might not know, and I had kind of forgot about this, but I revisited. Some of you might remember, I vaguely remembered because this was in the 80s, but the unusual passing of Len Bias. Now, Len Bias was he just got recruited by the Boston Celtics from the University of Maryland, and he passed away 2 days after he was drafted. He was very, very talented. He was, going to be a big star. And they did a documentary about his passing, I think it was about 10 or so years ago. And I learned a little bit more about the circumstances of his passing. And I looked into it more recently, and it is very, very unusual to the point where I don't think the official story is true. So the official story is 2 days after he was drafted, him and his dorm mates were celebrating, and he did a substance. I'm not supposed to say this word. It starts with a C. In the 80s, it was a big thing. He died from an overdose of this substance. And according to the reports, he had never done it before, and it caused cardiac arrest and seizures. And he died shortly after ingesting this substance. So right here, you can see that official cause of death is that substance intoxication. That dose interrupted the normal electrical control of his heartbeat, leading to seizures and cardiac arrest. Now, this is the part that's very strange. It says that he ingested 3 to 5 grams of pure substance dissolved in a drink. Okay, that is weird. I've never heard of that ever happening. I'm sure it has, but for someone that had never used the substance, that just sounds unusual. He was also at death, he didn't have any signs of other drugs or alcohol in his system. So he wasn't drinking, he wasn't doing anything else. It was just this. And there was no evidence that he had been a long-term user. He was also young. He was a top athlete in perfect health with no heart condition, nothing that would make him susceptible to this type of event. And here, I guess, again, it says a very healthy individual, and he had not used alcohol or any other drugs in the hours preceding to his collapse. Also, in the documentary, the friends that he was around said that they didn't bring him this substance. The investigation also showed that they did not bring him this drug. And something else, where does it say about the room? Okay, here, this is something else that is unexplainable. The police said they found the dormitory suite sanitized when they searched the rooms shortly after he was pronounced dead at the hospital. So that is weird. Why would it be sanitized? Who would have sanitized his room, and why? What was there that was trying to be hidden, right? Also, the plastic bag contained approximately 12 grams. That's a lot. And then they also mentioned they found cut straws. That is weird. I don't think you carry around like cut straws around with you. That's like not the only way that you can use it, especially if you're ingesting it. Okay, using a straw to like eat the substance. And then they also mention, the crystals, and they say a cognac bottle and several beer bottles in a trash bin outside of his dorm. And they say he didn't have any alcohol in his system. Why would they mention that there was alcohol bottles outside of his dorm? Because it's a dormitory, so other people drink, right? Why would they mention that in his report? I think it sounds staged to me. Like very, very obviously there was foul play, I think, to make it seem like this is what caused him to have cardiac arrest and drop dead. And I was trying to think, like, why would someone, or why would some entity want this? And this is the only thing that I have found that makes sense. Okay, Like, who was going to benefit from him not going to play in the NBA, not play for the Celtics? And this is where it led me, okay? So right after his passing, he was supposed to sign a deal with Reebok for $1.6 million. But he never got to do that because he was no longer alive. Okay, so he was going to make at this time a lot of money, and potentially much more as the years went on. At this time, Reebok, did I say Nike? Hey, he signed with Reebok. Reebok was the dominant athletic shoe brand in the 80s. I had a pair of these. This was like the shoe to have. Nike had their version, but Reebok was the leader in this realm, in this market. So who would benefit from this not happening? And the only kind of logical explanation, and I've heard this from other people that have followed basketball very closely. My husband went to the University of Maryland, so he's very familiar with the Bias death. And he strongly believes, and a lot of people believe, that if Bias went to play in the NBA, he would have joined forces with Larry Bird with the Celtics. He would have been going toe-to-toe with Jordan. They would have been rivals. They would have been at the same level. And Chicago may not have been as dominant as they were. So Bias was younger. He was super talented. He was going with a top team. At the time, Larry Bird was, kind of at his prime, maybe he was like 30. So, maybe going towards the downfall, but still a very, very dominant player in the NBA, still winning championships. So that's kind of my conclusion, is that the entity that benefited the most from Len Bias's death is this, Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan, Nike, and the entity that was benefiting from Jordan's career. Now, I don't think Michael Jordan had anything to do with that. He probably doesn't know anything about that. But that is my conclusion, looking at all the different possibilities. I'll bring up a couple of other things that could have been the reason for this staged unaliving. Shortly after the passing of Len Bias, they passed a law. They call it the Len Bias law, or the Bias law. And that made dealers responsible for manslaughter or the murder of the person that overdosed on that substance. So they were able to hold the dealers responsible. So that could have been part of it, but there were many other athletes that also OD'd, a lot of other high profile people at the time that OD'd. So I don't think that would have been enough motivation to do such a high profile unaliving as Len Bias's was. And so another topic, and this will be the third possibility for Bias's passing. And this brings us to something very dark. I've been learning about this recently, and it's hard to believe. When I first heard that this was a thing, I didn't believe it because, I've watched sports throughout the years. It just seems like these people are just talented and very hardworking. And that's how they become the elite athletes that they are. And that's how they make this money and become the cultural, the cultural leaders, the influencers of our time. But there is a lot of evidence and people coming forward saying that the elites or the cabal is very much involved in professional sports. They are very much in control of who gets to the elite level in sports. And here's an interview from a man named Khalil. He was a professional soccer player, but this is what he has to say.
Former professional soccer player Khalil Lambin, you have an absolutely wild story, including the offer to sell your soul for success. Tell us about it.
Well, as a young Ivorian who was born in Ivory Coast in a Muslim family, I always thought that becoming a professional footballer, meaning your talent, working hard, until the day I reached the UK. And in the UK, I was offered by a journalist who in the beginning, I was not aware that he was part of this. So he basically said, let's have a interview about you. You've been in Thailand, you've been in Qatar, you've been all over the place as a young player. So the fans want to know more about you. So obviously I was naive and I said yes. And a couple of weeks later, I got some time. We went to a coffee place. And as I arrived, brother, he looked me straight in the eyes and he told me that I'm not a journalist. I'm like, if you are an agent, I already got a football agent. If you are from another team, I don't want to move from my actual team. I'm fine where I am. But then he said, no, we rule this world. We rule the sport industry. We rule the finance industry. We rule the music industry. And if you want to be part of the elite in your sport, you have to join the elite. So I was like, whew, bro, that was like tough because for me, I have to do to be part of the elite. He said, there is nothing physical. I will give you an address. You come at such and such time and we will initiate you. I was like, whew. And as the voice of my mom was a seed in my heart, she kept, as he's speaking, I'm hearing, do not sell your soul. Do not sell your soul. I was like, I can't do that. And I could see his energy, his aura was getting like really, no, that can't be possible. And I was like, no, I can't. And if you ask me today, I know that Jesus saved me from that. Because fast forward a couple of years, through Islam, I've met Jesus, as you know. And as I'm reading the Bible says that what would a man give in exchange for his soul? And I was like, that's exactly what happened to me a couple of years ago. But now that I'm in ministry, supporting sports people into the world of football, I'm seeing footballers after one another coming to me and say, bro, actually your testimony touched me because I've joined them. Are you sure Jesus can save me? I say, what did you do for you to join? They asked me to offer my son. They asked me to go into some intimate relationship with my own mother.
So yeah, those types of stories are coming out, and there are a lot of rumors that Larry Bird is part of this group. Something that always comes up. He's been 33 since high school. He's been there's just been a lot of talk that he was kind of put in this role. And he actually owns the number 33. They retired it, so no one can have that unless he gives them authorization. And players that have a very strong connection to their number, they keep their number and they retire it. It's my understanding. But, and then you think about the other elite athletes, and another one that has been accused for being involved in these ritual abuses and kind of runs in the same crowd with others that have been known to be a part of the cabal is LeBron James. Now, again, another very talented, dominant athlete, has been extremely successful financially with his marketing and endorsements. Before he even played in the NBA, he had, I think, over $100 million worth of marketing deals. I remember when he was interviewed right before he started to play in the NBA, I think Oprah was talking to him, and she asked, how do you deal with the pressure of all this, all this expectations of you being this great player and all this money on the line? And he said, I don't. I just know it's going to work out. And he just doesn't worry about not living up to his expectations. And I thought, wow, that's a very confident young man. He was like 17 at the time. He came straight from high school. But maybe he knew more. Maybe he knew that there was another force on his side that was going to open doors and make sure of his success, So that is what I wanted to discuss about professional sports. And another industry that I thought of that might be pulling from some sort of genetic program, genetic manipulation, the hybridization of humans, is politics. It's just one of those industries that, it's so closely related to the agencies, the three-letter agencies. A lot of people from the agencies go into politics. So the person that first came to mind is Charlie Kirk, and we know a lot about him now because of his unexpected unaliving. And if you want to know what I really think, I have a whole playlist of what I really think happened. But the thing that I wanted to bring up that I don't think a lot of people know about is that he's not the first Kirk, or he's not the first, his name wasn't Charlie, but there was a politician. He was a governor from Florida from the 60s, and his name was Claude Kirk. And if you look at his face and his head and his hairline, they have that very unusual shaped head and hairline. And Charlie has that. And they look, very much alike, I think. If you could imagine Claude, a little bit younger. And again, they were very charismatic politicians. Well, Charlie was going to be a politician, I'm sure. But they have a lot in common. And it doesn't just stop at their personality and their industry and what they look like, but they have another very unusual commonality, and that is in Erica Kirk. They were both married to an Erica Kirk, and the similarities between the two Erica Kirks are very eerie. Here's a little clip from a channel. He did a really good series. He did about 4 videos on just this. I'll link it in the description. But this is what he had to say about Erica Kirk.
Than life type guy who was governor of Florida from 1967 to 1971 and was even mentioned as a vice presidential and even a presidential candidate. And this is just insanely weird. There's no other way to put it, because as you can tell, they have the same name. They both look identical. There's definitely something very strange going on here. I'll kind of get into what I think is going on a little later in the video, but first wanted to tell the story of the 1960s and 70s Erica Kirk, because it's a real interesting story, and she was regarded as this real woman of mystery. So when Claude Kirk was elected governor of Florida in 1966, he was single. He was actually called the most eligible bachelor in Florida at the time. And when he had his inauguration ball in January of 1967, after he took office, he shocked all of Florida when he showed up to the ball with a woman. And this girl was just a total mystery. No one knew who she was. No one had ever seen her with Claude Kirk before. And when he introduced her to people, he just referred to her as Madam X. And there was just all these massive stories about who was this mysterious girl who was with Claude Kirk.
Yeah, so very similar to the younger Erica Kirk. And so the first Erica Kirk, the story is she's from Germany. She's German from Germany, immigrated to Brazil, and then ends up marrying the governor. And she kind of comes out of nowhere. She just shows up at this ball as Madame X, and then they get married shortly after. And kind of like how Charlie Kirk was, I don't know how long he was single, but the circumstances in which he met Erica are kind of, there's different stories, and, they got married right away and had kids. And, we've heard a lot about that relationship and how she's probably his handler. But what if they are all part of this genetic program? They've been programmed from before birth, and they've not just been genetically programmed, but also psychologically programmed and put into places of influence and power. And those are our influencers of our culture, our civilization. They're put in place to influence us, and at the same time make money off of the public. And so the question is, why would they use like a very similar person and then make another one? I don't know, But then I started to think, what are the genetic markers that they would look for or to program to make the best politician? And that's kind of hard because a lot of these things are learned or, programmed through our upbringing or taught. But Shane, what do you think are like genetic markers that would be potentially programmed for a future politician?
Well,
Yeah.
politicians would have to be influential, and in order to be an influential person, you have to not only be like confident in what you're saying, but you also have to, I guess, understand not only your target audience, but like the emotions that you're eliciting in the target audience. So I would assume that they are probably someone who's good at manipulating emotions, but not as susceptible to emotions themselves. So someone who's perhaps sociopathic or psychopathic, perhaps narcissistic. And I would assume that they would probably also look for like the dark triad of traits, so psychological traits as well. So some of that's probably genetic and some of that's probably psychological. But I would think when it comes to genetically, predispositioned politicians, I would say we're looking for someone who carries a lot of confidence, who may also be genetically predisposed towards sociopathy or psychopathy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking probably even further. So if you can imagine the influence that a more intelligent species has over the human population, it would probably be things that the average person doesn't really possess, that we might not even be aware of is happening. And I know because I've listened to so many ET encounters, abduction stories, something that comes up almost consistently is that these beings don't communicate verbally, they communicate telepathically. So they can not only give messages non-verbally, but they can also read our thoughts and know what we're saying without us speaking. So if you think about a politician having that ability, I think that would be key, to be able to read a room like instantly without even having to look or not even to really having to read people, but just having that innate ability to know what is on everyone's minds and what they're thinking, and even the ability to put ideas telepathically into people's heads. And then now with media being so available, being able to program people through the screen, through words, basically hypnotizing people or brainwashing people by the media that we are exposed to. And I think studies have shown that this is happening. It doesn't have to be an extremely telepathic or extremely influential person, but this is really how our reality is being formed now. If you listen to media, if you watch the media, you are shaping your reality and you're forming your thoughts and you're forming your perspective on the world and what you think about politics, what you think about history and everything. So maybe that is something that they're looking for to implant into the influencers, the politicians, the cultural leaders of today. That's kind of where my mind went.
Yeah. And I would say empathy and sympathy probably does play a role, but only to a certain degree. You wouldn't want someone to be too empathic in that role because then they would probably identify with their victims. So perhaps in place of something like empathy, they might have some sort of, perhaps telepathy is the wrong word, but they could probably sense the emotions or thoughts of the target and use that to their advantage without having to actually feel it like in an empathic sort of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think this might have been going on, as early as the days of, well, certainly like when Germany was the world power. I think that was definitely happening, being studied, being looked into, and they were known to be studying eugenics and manipulating genes in order to create the future race, probably the future leaders of our world. But it probably dates back way before that, potentially to the beginnings of the human species. If you look into the stories of the Anunnaki and, where did humans come from and why are we so different from the other mammals and the other primates and hominids? What made us change so rapidly? Why do we advance so fast versus other species? And I do think there was manipulation, and I believe it never really stopped. Like, why would a advanced being manipulate and just kind of let it go? I think this is a reality of humanity. It's a reality of just evolution, not in the sense that Darwin said, but the changing of our species and the advancement of our race as humans. I almost think it's always been there, and it's just been kept secret, and we're starting to hear a lot about people that are part reptilian and that have these features that they look human, but they'll have these features that aren't quite human, like their eyes, their skin, their hair. They say like redheads and red hair and like maybe green eyes might be a leftover of the Atlanteans. And then something I learned from having kids is a lot of humans are, not a lot, but it's not that uncommon for a human to be born with a 3-chambered heart. And they say that is a reptilian trait. And doctors, I don't know if they say that it's a ancient genetic trait from a reptilian ancestor, but it very well might be. And a lot of humans do have reptilian features, not necessarily the slit eyes, but there are people that have other traits from different species. So I think maybe this has always been the case, but we've just not been educated on it or let into the truth about our species and how we evolved to what we are. And when I learn about like the hidden history, not the ones that we were taught to in school, there is a lot of evidence that humans existed with other types of advanced beings, more advanced than humans. So if they're more advanced, thousands, potentially millions of years, and we're the slave race, it's just natural to think that this manipulation has continued throughout the, thousands and thousands of years. But at what level and who is more manipulated, I think is the question. And how are they using that, I think is kind of what I would like to know.
Same here.
All right. So that's the presentation. Was there any comments or questions?
Let's see. I think we do have a few that are at least, they're not all questions, but let's see here. Will we ever get answers? I keep on hoping. Crossed my fingers and toes. That's pretty talented to be able to cross your toes, actually.
I mean, I think we kind of have the answer. And I think the reason, like the mainstream and our actual politicians aren't being so forthcoming is they want to control the narrative. They want us to see it the way they want us to see it. And that's why I do encourage people to ask the right questions when this slow disclosure is happening. I do think they are disclosing it just little by little. And, maybe Burchett and Gates are part of that. But I hope that we don't get too wrapped up in this, like, are these aliens, trapped in some dumb, underground base being AR'd. I don't think it's like that. We're putting our own ideas of what this is and putting that into this unknown program. I think it's more sophisticated than that. I think it's a lot more kind of like integrated within our society. And I don't think it's anything new. Like a lot of these topics I look into and it's like, nothing's really new. It's just that we've been given information, but it's very incomplete. And so we have to kind of guess as to how it's actually happening. But I could make more content on examples of other species that have been kind of mainstreamed within our society and the problems that have arisen. But those stories are very fantastical. It takes some time to believe it. And it's just, I'm trying not to like put it all forward because it sounds so crazy, but and like, okay, I saw this is what I wanted to eventually address. Cryptids paranormal is my new sport in the context. So another hybrid are cryptids. And I think those are very ancient. And I think you all know I believe in Sasquatch, and I think they are some type of hybrid, half human and half something else. And they've done DNA studies proving that the maternal side is human from the Middle East 13,000 years ago, and the paternal side is unknown. So they don't have that in the database. So, another example of a hybrid, but I don't think they all look alike. I think they range from all sorts of different appearances. There's even like they say a dog human hybrid, and going back into some of the other videos I've made about the ancient Sumerians and how they did depict a lot of chimeras, half human, half animal. It was a big part of their culture and it made up a lot of their art. I don't think this is new. I think it's always been this way. And I brought this up before. I think the ability for some of these cryptids to be able to surface has to do with the energies, the electromagnetism that is going on our planet, and that is always changing. And I think we are starting to enter a time in Earth's history where that is going to start to become more common. So Wes Germer from Sasquatch Chronicles, I've listened to almost all of his encounters, over 1,000 at this point. He takes thousands and thousands of cryptid encounters. And he said that dog hybrid creature seems to be coming up more. He's getting more of those encounters more recently. So maybe there is something going on within Earth and within us as a species that's creating them to be able to materialize more. And I think that has throughout the history of our planet, it has, increased and gone down. And I think we're at that time when it's going to start happening more. And even the writing script. Even scripture.
Okay, so real quick, Mr. Duffy says, I think these dog creatures are created by the military and being used as weapons against us. And that is probably what your dog was trying to say as well.
Yeah, he always barks when I bring up the dog
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the creations, but I think there's been reports of that dog man werewolf thing for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians have Anubis, the dog jackal hybrid, all over the walls. So I think they've existed, and I think that currently there is a program, but I don't think they're all the same. I think there's some ancient ones, and then more recently there's been some like genetic splicing using CRISPR and DNA manipulation to make hybrids of animals and humans. And I have no doubt that that technology exists and that it's being done. It's just they're not really telling us because I think people will get really mad. Oh yeah, frequencies are stirring them. Yeah, so I think the earth changes going on right now, including the electromagnetism and the frequencies are changing their abilities and maybe feeding their ability to materialize more now than before. And that's really scary, you know, because I listen to a lot of these encounters, and some of those hybrids are really terrifying. If you think about the Nephilim, they are cannibalistic, and they are, from people that have encountered them, they are like you do not want to encounter a Nephilim. I think that is probably the worst possible situation to be in because they do want to eat humans. That is like their goal in life, is the jinn hybrid. So I think jinn is like a general word for spirit. You know, in the Middle East, they just say, oh, that's the jinn. That's like a blanket statement for spirit. That's my understanding. It could be evil. It could be angelic. Okay, is there anything else you wanted me to put?
Well, we had one comment that was kind of shocking. Terry says, my sister and I were part of it. We were abducted in 1974, and that was the beginning.
Yeah, so the abduction phenomena, there's just so much to unpack there, but I don't think that's new. I think there are different agencies doing it. I don't think it's necessarily in extraterrestrial. I think there are like humans that can do it too, and there are different reasons for that. And yeah, I heard it's terrifying. It's like the most horrible thing to have to be to happen to you. And then I also heard like families, like someone experiences it and then they find out their mom went through it and then their mother went through it. So it's like there's an interest in certain kind of bloodlines that they abduct certain people for certain reasons. I think it's different, but yeah, I don't think it's just this the genetic manipulation. I think there are other things going on, like tracking, different kind of experiments. But I think at this point, there's been so many reports. I've probably myself heard, I mean, I've been listening to encounters since I was a child, so probably like thousands of encounters. They're not all true, but the ones that I really give credibility to are the ones where there's a mass sighting, like the Zimbabwe school children, where like 30 kids and their teachers saw these beings. But they're all different and they're not all here for the same reason. They don't all happen for the same thing, I don't think. Okay, this person and I were standing in my living room, and I swear his pupils weren't round, they were elongated. I walked in the kitchen 3 times to shake my head and have a drink of water, like WTF. Yeah, that's another thing people do see, have seen people just randomly on the street with the elongated eyes. And
I have
guess that could
personally
be-
seen that myself as well.
Okay, yeah, I hear a lot of people will see that, and that could be a hybrid. And then there's this other kind of way of thinking that it's also like a transformation. Like some people can actually, you know, through a cult and rituals, like a normal human can, like in a way, bring that type of entity on and bring that onto them. And then some people will see that. So I don't know exactly like what the difference are. Best and worst time to be alive, I know, for real. The alien invasion hoax. Yeah, so I think my audience understands that we're not being like taken over by an alien race that's coming from some other star system. I don't think that's what we're talking about. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but what what we're being kind of let into as far as the disclosure goes. Just be very careful as to how they say it, and the media we've been given and the movies we've seen. I think we've been given a false narrative as to what a intelligent species is. I don't think they're necessarily like little grays. I think that could be sometimes, but I think we're dealing with a phenomena that is a lot more complicated and a lot more varied than what we've been told. But yeah, don't be afraid of an invasion, because if there was an invasion, it's happened a long time ago. That's my theory.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carl says they do make contact lenses like that, and they do.
Yeah.
But my particular sighting was in the mid '90s, which would be, I think, prior to the widespread use of cosmetic lenses. So I'm not really sure if cosmetic lenses were much of a thing in the mid '90s. I mean, they might have been, but this was my particular example is I ran a department of a department store, and I had a customer that was shopping in my department and had some questions about the products. And I noticed that this particular customer had vertical pupils instead of the round ones. So they were like vertical slits, looked kind of like cat eyes, and had commented on it. And she said she was born that way. And so that was that. And I didn't really push the subject any further, but I did think it was odd at the time.
She probably was. And I don't think it's that uncommon. And I think if someone was born like that, they probably wear like the regular contacts so that they don't get asked that.
Probably.
I would assume.
I bet nowadays they would employ cosmetic lenses to hide
Cover
that.
it.
Yes.
Yeah, you get tired of being called a reptile, right?
Mm-hmm.
So negative blood type 2. Yeah, if you guys want me to do an RH negative blood type or blood type video, I can, because I have been learning a lot about that. It is a big, big, big topic. Very big topic. I know Robert Sepper does a good series on it. He's done many, many videos on it. But I remember, in Japan, almost everyone knows what their blood type is. I think like the study said 98, 99% of people in Japan know what their blood type is. But in America, like they don't really tell you, and people aren't as interested. And I didn't know until I was in the hospital, and after I had one of my kids, I just happened to look at my chart and I saw my blood type. And my mom always told me that I was an O, or maybe I just thought I was like O positive. But then it wasn't that. And I was like, that's my blood type? And then they're like, yeah. And I said, I thought it was kind of a rare one. I said, isn't it kind of like odd? They're like, no, we see that. I don't want to say it here, but it was kind of a surprise. And I was actually surprised I was never told it and never really asked. Yeah, a lot of doctors won't tell you. I have a funny story. A counterpart I worked with, he said when his son was born, his wife took the baby to the checkup or something, or she went for her checkup and asked the nurse, can I find out what my blood type is? And then they like pulled some, like they like left the room, and some like doctor came and said, do we need to talk about something? Do you not know who the father is? And she was just started laughing like, no, I just want to know what my blood type is. They thought that she didn't know who the father of her child was. I just thought that was like, so, just such a weird reaction, that the doctor doesn't want to tell you what your blood type is and thinks that because you're asking is because you're not sure who your child's father was. But I don't know why they don't want us to know or to ask. But yeah.
Shay says this went on from 1984 through I think 1994, 95, and it has been interviewed by J. Allen Hynek, and MUFON has his files now. He was actually retired, but wanted to talk to him or her.
I know who J. Allen Hynek. Is he still alive? I know he did Project Blue Book. What went on from So from what I know about J. Allen Hynek, he was assigned to start a project called Project Blue Book, and his job was to discredit anyone who had an abduction or sighting. But he actually knew that it was a real thing, but he was given the job to discredit any reports. That's all I know. I've seen some documents on him, but
Okay.
but that's it.
Let's see. Trish says, okay, the only animal hybrid human experiments that are official are organs made from pig genes. I have heard about that. They haven't disclosed full on regeneration because it would make everyone think about it. Yeah. So if they could regenerate whole organs, what else could they do? And then she also says pigs came from boars, but how? Human interbreeding with boars. Well, I don't know about if she means human interbreeding with boars or humans interbreeding pigs and boars or something like that. Let's see here. And then Arcane Discipline says grays are frog people deceivers who have always been here. And yes, they're demonic. Evil people can shapeshift into them. And
yeah, well, L.A. Marzulli, he's been saying this for a long time, that the grays are like an avatar. So they often will hold the spirit of the demonic. So they're biological meat suits, and they can house a spirit who is not physical. So
Okay.
I tend to go with that, but again, they could be other forms of it.
Right.
I'm not one to say this is what it is and that's it.
And this is another phenomenon that I feel I may have actually experienced at one point, where I saw what I would call a shapeshift, but to me it was more of a dimensional or spiritual phenomenon, perhaps a perceptual phenomenon on my own part. But what it looked like to me was someone shapeshifting into not necessarily a reptile, but I thought it looked more amphibious to me. And I thought it was odd that this guy here, Arcane, says that they are frog people. And I don't know necessarily that they're all evil. I would think perhaps that could be a little bit racist, because this particular person that I know of, I had known very well personally for several years. And I struck me as a good person, even after several years. So it might actually be slightly racist to assume that all of one race is evil. But yes, that is a phenomenon I think I may have also witnessed.
Yeah, I think I try to, when I hear stuff like that, is like if another species were to say, oh, those evil humans are no good. There probably are really bad. There are bad humans that are up to no good, but they're also good ones. That's kind of how I try to look at things,
Yeah.
But I can see how another race will think humans are evil, because
Right.
a lot of what we do is evil. But okay, yeah, we're at 4:00, so I'm gonna cut it there. And I don't know what my next topic will be, but yeah, leave in the comments if you want me to continue on this topic. This is something I know a lot about. I just tend not to, because there is so much information. There's so many channels. There's so many different opinions. I'm very opinionated into what I think, but I don't know everything. And I'm not one of those creators that's going to come on here and say, this is how it is no matter what, like a lot of other channels do. And I know maybe some people don't like that. They want to know, what is it? And the truth is, no one really knows, not at least anyone that I've heard. And even when you hear an official figure come out and say, this is how it is, this topic is not a one size fits all. I think it is a topic that you will need to learn for, the rest of your life to really fully understand it. So the more I learn about this, the more I realize how much I don't know and how much there is to learn. So, so glad I caught you today. I'm so glad you joined today too. So, for those that were on my last live, when I said my channel was demonetized, they did demonetize my channel last week, and then I appealed it, and then they reversed it. So I'm monetized again. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to share today. And I'll be putting something out later in the week. If not, I'll go live again on Friday. So yeah, thank you guys so much for joining and for your participation. And if you're seeing this in the future, let me know in the comments if this topic, if you want me to elaborate on the blood types and the historical evidence of the hybridization, because there's just so much there that it would take a full video to even start to get into those topics. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all soon. Bye.
They piece it together. They ask why every hidden